Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight we have a late night insight video on a Guerlain, probably my favorite French house, and we are going to the L'Art and La Matière collection, and one of my perfume god people sent me this, and I've been playing with this for months and months and months now. I don't know if you can see, it's very light, but this is called Angelique Noire from 2005. So I'm going to do a little bit of a reapplication on my right arm. I've got a dry down of a couple hours on my left arm here. So let us try and dab this bad boy on. I'll put a little bit more. Okay. So there you have it. There's some fresh application of Angelique Noire. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the backstory. Let me read you the blurb and then we'll talk a little bit about the fragrance itself. This is another one that obviously I would not be able to discuss on the channel if not for the generosity of the community. So thank you very much, my perfume god person who sent this my way. By the way, my scent of the day is also a Guerlain. So it's a Guerlain day. This is a 2014 bottle of Mitsouko EDP. My God, man, I was in heaven all day with this. This stuff is phenomenal. Crazy how good they've kept that, at least as of 10 years ago. I haven't smelled the new stuff, but so the blurb on Angelique Noire, and by the way, it's been like Angelique week because just this week I actually reviewed a fragrance by Creed that was rumored to be put out in 1933, but re-released in 2019 called Angelique Encens. You can go check out that review. So it's an Angelique week for the Ram. But according to Guerlain, this is Angelica flower paired with opulent vanilla. It's powerful and polarizing opposite. And it's interesting because, you know, this came out in a time when Guerlain was going through a lot of major changes. This is the time where I think Jean-Paul Guerlain really started to take a step back. Even though he wasn't officially disbarred from his house, if you want to put it that way, it seems like at this point in 2005, he sort of began to take his foot off the gas a little bit, allow some other perfumers to come in and do work. One of them was Daniela Andrier, who I think would probably say that this was a very rewarding experience working for Guerlain and creating Angelique Noire, but there were many others. Francis Kirkjohn created Rose Barbare. Annick Minardo did Bois d'Harmonie around this time, and the list goes on, actually. There's more of this L'Art and La Matière collection. So current prices are pretty high. I will say 100 mils will set you back $395, which is not cheap compared to what they were just seeming 5 or 10 years ago. But here's what they say. Angelique Noire, a contrasting bittersweet interpretation of Angelica. In the world of perfumery, Angelique Noire performs what is known as a spectacular choreography of opposites. All too often weakly dosed due to its bitterness, this Angelica flower reveals itself after coming into contact with opulent vanilla. It's powerful and fascinating opposite. Accompanied by pink pepper and cedar, the contrast is irresistible. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the very first thing that hit me, because my reaction the very first time I smelled this was, wow, this smells like a Guerlain. That's literally the first thing I thought when I actually jotted that note down. When this hit my skin, the very first time I ever smelled it, which was months and months ago, I thought, this is a Guerlain, through and through. You know, it smells like a Guerlain, it feels like a Guerlain, it wears like a Guerlain, and it got me thinking, it could also be maybe like a Celine fragrance. Celine sometimes feels like there's that, you know, very soft feeling that is accompanied with some of the other Guerlains. But that style, you know, that textbook on how to create a fragrance of this sort of caliber is done in Angelique Noire. Now, many people upon first sniff, I would venture, are going to say, that's weak, that's soft, it's powdery, this may be one you really have to spend some time with. It wasn't an instant love like Neroli Ultra Noir. Like Neroli Ultra Noir for me, if I could buy one from the L'Art and La Matière collection right now, it would be that one, because that was like, I sprayed it and I was like, wow. Like, you know, that is one that I would, if I was still buying perfume, which I can't right now, but if I was still buying perfume, I would have a bottle of Neroli Ultra Noir. This is one, I feel like it had to grow on me over the months of me kind of just randomly applying this to my skin periodically before bed and stuff like that. But from the very first time it hit my skin, I thought, this is a Guerlain. And it basically starts off what made me think this is a proper Guerlain creation is that it starts off with soft powders and this almost nutty smelling tonka bean and this very gentle, soft vanilla. And Guerlain is the king vanilla creator as far as I'm concerned. And it almost seems like it's trying to be careful. Like the vanilla is trying not to offend a soul, you know, like it's whispering in the library or something. The vanilla has that feeling to it. This fragrance has this very soft, loving soul about it. Someone who knows if another person wrongs you, they're hurting themselves more than they're hurting you. You know, that sort of wisdom is in this fragrance. And everything in this fragrance just seems to whisper to you, you know. I would bet people who like soft and quiet fragrances, like Eugene comes to mind. I know my brother Eugene from You Smells Good, and the creator of the Les Abstrait line. I can't wait to see what he comes up with next. But, you know, I bet folks who like soft, quiet type fragrances would love this. This is right in that wheelhouse. It also has this strange yeasty smell, like yeast and vanilla to me for some reason in the beginning. And just imagine this Guerlain, you know, creation of florals and a little bit of spices and that classic Guerlain vanilla. It's there from the very beginning. And imagine the feeling of soft rolls. You know, you put bread rolls in the oven, and as they start to rise, they kind of gently crack open and steam just kind of releases from the roll at a certain temperature. This exposure, and then you take them out, and you can still kind of just sort of, you know, the roll still feels a little bit doughy in your hand. That's the feeling of the vanilla here. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful creation. Now, there is also a touch of Angelica Seed, which is in the name. Angelique in French is Angelica. So, Angelica Seed basically is supposed to give off this very light, almost like aromatic and herbaceous scent. Guerlain says verdant greenery, but verdant to me gives off the feeling of intense greenery, and that is not the case here, I must admit. You know, the greenery is a backdrop, it's a drape, it's a tapestry. The Guerlain and the Guerlain DNA sort of just engulf you from the beginning, in my opinion. So the essential oil extracted from Angelica Seed is similar to the oil extracted from the roots, which come into play later, but the seed oil is generally much lighter and more aromatic, okay? So the feeling of that bitterness here, which it's there, but it's always subdued, right? So Angelica can be known as a very bitter, harsh type of green smell, right? Rooty and green, but it's here, that bitterness is always under the surface, okay? It almost feels like they sort of took some of the fragrances that were being crafted for Guerlain already and just kind of put a slight microcosm of that green, a slight film, you know, of that green feeling underneath it all. And I will say, sometimes I get the bitter green, and sometimes I'll put it on, and it feels like the Guerlain vanilla and that Guerlain made up of spices and flowers and probably some tonka bean. Feels like it overwhelms everything, you know. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Nobody, in my opinion, does vanilla like Guerlain. They are the, if I want a vanilla fragrance, Guerlain satisfies every single time. And this could easily be added to that list. This could easily be added to that well-done vanilla list. It's not easy to do a vanilla well, in my opinion. It's very easy to make them too sweet. And this has a little bit of sweetness to it, but not enough that it would put me off, because the beauty of the fragrance, you know, it's almost like you can feel the history of the House of Guerlain in Angelique Noire. So what ends up kind of really capturing me is this feeling of weightlessness. Sort of comes back to you over and over again. And I keep thinking about this, experiencing the fragrance and thinking about this creation by Daniela Andrier, which basically seems to have taken on this very weightless, light, aromatic style. You know, the vanilla doesn't really seem like it's super heavy. And I got to thinking about, you know, the Dior Homme style, which was very popular around the time that this was released. And if you sort of add little hints of iris to this sort of style, and probably even what she learned at Guerlain making this fragrance, peeking through the background of some of her work, you basically have the next 20 years of what was done at Prada. You know, she made a ton of Prada fragrances that, and I own a couple of them, and I really like some of the Prada fragrances. But this feels special in a way. This feels like it was like a starting point. Like, it feels like not only did she kind of give us this creation, but it also feels like this could be a creation where she learned a lot from this composition. And probably my guess is, and again, this is just me speculating, my guess is in 2005, Jean-Paul Guerlain, even though he was at the end of his career, was probably still giving tips and tricks and pointers and all that stuff to perfumers like Daniela Andrier. And I would bet if you asked her that she would probably say working with him was one of kind of the highlights of her career, would be my guess. If he did actually work with her on creating this. He's not listed, but I would find it very hard to believe that he just said, do whatever you want, you know, because this feels like it has the heart and soul of a Guerlain. So, staying with the top, there is basically a few other notes working with the Angelica Seed. One is pink pepper, and pink pepper just adds a touch of this sort of classy, rosy, acceptable, rosy, peppery type feel. But here again, it's ever so carefully dosed. You know, you're picking up a theme here. Gentle, soft, whisper, careful, you know, all of those words describe this fragrance beautifully. Like telling the chef easy on the pink pepper, and so she just kind of puts the most microscopic pinch of pink pepper on your dish because she kind of rolls her eyes, sure, easy on the pink pepper, you know. It's that kind of feel. Yes, it's here, but it's very, very carefully dosed. So it doesn't, too much pink pepper I've always thought makes me feel too designer, you know, too mainstream designer, Macy's counter type thing. So they've avoided that trap. Now, the note in the top that you will smell, and it's impossible to fully understand this composition without it, is the pear, okay? And I must say, I'm usually not a big fan of pear in my perfume. I mean, I like to eat pear, but I don't know if I really would ever think, man, I really want a pear in my perfume. But here, it's used beautifully as a counterweight or whatever you want to call it. And if you've ever had a pear that is like so soft when you bite into it, you know, it's not old necessarily. It's not moldy or old or anything like that, but it's just soft. And, you know, the flesh is ever so soft when you bite into it. It just feels like, you know, it's very, very juicy and soft and just sort of almost like melts into the bite that you're taking into the pear. But of course you have the outer skin of the pear and all that stuff. Imagine that, and then imagine this natural sweetness from the pear mixing with the vanilla, and then you go to pair it with the, sorry, I couldn't help myself, pair it with the tree wood. So imagine this pear tree wood mixing with the pear fruitiness. And there's probably no pear wood in here. Although I know there are fragrances that use pear wood, but that's what came to my mind as I was smelling this. I think they listed cedar or something like that. But just imagine this very dense, slightly toasted, like pear wood feeling. And that could come from the tonka bean that's also not listed, but I'm pretty sure I get tonka in here. So imagine the slightly toasted pear tree wood smell underneath. It's absolutely beautiful. Soft, but beautiful, okay? Now, as it continues into the Drydown, there is some jasmine sambac that's at play here, but it isn't the sharp, very piercing type of jasmine that you find in vintage masculine perfumes that I talk about a lot on the channel. Here, it's kind of a little musky, ever so green, although again, maybe that's the greenness from the Angelica, again, peeking its head through, because again, it's just like a thin veneer of Angelica. And everything else is this sort of homage to the Guerlain style of creating fragrances. Angelica can also have this chartreuse, like liqueur smell, which I've never tried before, but after reading about it, I would really like to. It's supposed to have this green aromatic type taste with lots of spices and stuff like that mixed in. So you notice I'm staying away from some of the descriptors that I used in Creed's Angelique Noire when I reviewed it earlier in the week, like rooty, bitter, dusty, all of those, you know, clearly were purposefully avoided while I was discussing this fragrance, because here the Angelica just gives it this soft, luminous glow, you know, a little bit of this green, luminous sort of outline, if you will. The Angelica is called an umbellifier. That's umbellifer, excuse me, umbellifer, or umbrella-like plant, according to the Perfume Society. And while this isn't originally what they meant, if you can imagine an umbrella sort of protecting the people underneath, right? Here, it is the umbrella-like protection of anything harsh or bitter or rooty or dusty. Everything here is rounded and soft and gentle and likable. It's very hard to imagine anybody just out and out disliking this smell, okay? Now, I think there's a whole group of people that would not buy this based on its soft, gentle personality. Some people like hardcore beast mode fragrances, and as I said, I would probably be one of those people where if you just put this in front of me at a shop and said, smell it, I'd probably go, you know, okay, fine. But spending month in and month out with it, it's really grown on me. And I love Guerlain, but you have to like that Guerlain aesthetic is the thing, you know? This has the soul of old Guerlains in it. So, like I said, if I was going to buy another Guerlain from this line, it would be Neroli Ultra Noir. Hands down, no questions asked. I love that smoky tea thing. I've reviewed it on the channel. You can check it out. But, to be fair, Angelique Noire is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, I mentioned that in the top, you had Angelica Seed, right? Which is supposed to be the more aromatic type smell. In the base is where they've used Angelica Root, but it never turns rooty per se, okay? At least not to my nose. You know, maybe it gives you a little bit of a contrast of this like bitter sweetness. You've ever had like a, I don't know, some candy or something that's like bitter and sweet at the same time? I think it plays a little bit of that contrast. And if you read some of the blurbs, you know, they go on to mention things like, for example, it says the fragrance artist touch, half angel, half demon. So again, talking of contrast, bitter and sweet. The verdant, crisp, and herbal bitterness of Angelica. Again, maybe Angelica is like that, but that doesn't shine through in the fragrance to me that way. Is kept at bay, okay, so there you go, they're agreeing with me, by the enveloping sweetness of vanilla. If it were a ballet, Swan Lake by Tchaikovsky would be the ballet for this fragrance. You can imagine the white swan and the black swan coming together, right? That contrast here. And I think that this makes good perfumery, especially for the shit we're given nowadays, even in the high-end designer line, even by these quote-unquote higher-end brands like Dior and Guerlain and all that stuff. This is a breath of fresh air to get to discover and get to know and all of that stuff. So, you know, the fragrance seems to have this like kaleidoscope. The last thing I'll mention in closing, because again, this is just like an early impression video. I don't own a bottle. I haven't spent years with it or anything like that. But from my testings, I will say one thing that caught my attention outside of everything I mentioned is that there's this like kaleidoscope of colors or powders, and all of varying ingredients and color is how I would describe it. So imagine all these different sort of powders, different grades, different colors, and then you just kind of drop them onto the earth. And so like an archaeologist sort of digging through the dirt and layers, instead of finding different layers in the earth, in the world of Angelique Noire, you find different grains of powders with that Guerlain base, okay? And like I said, the downside is invariably the strength of the fragrance, but if you pay attention closely, if you're very gentle, quiet, you know, put on some music in the background, just smell this and pay attention to it, you'll get that little powdery vanillic aspect underneath. And I think that my guess is that the sort of green touches in here, the Angelica Seed and the Angelica Root in the top and the base were used to sort of, you know, keep the vanilla to heal, keep it at bay, keep it from going too far off the leash and becoming too sweet and opulent and all of this stuff. It adds a little bit of bitterness to it, and that's how I like my vanilla. I do not like the, you know, candied, sweet, bubblegummy type vanilla fragrances. I don't like that at all. I like it when it's a little bit more bitter and realistic. And, you know, Shalimar is my favorite vanilla. Shalimar is a pure, bitter, sort of animalic take on vanilla. Not necessarily bitter, but animalic is how I would describe it. And I love that heavy, heavy contrast of bergamot in the top with the animalics down below. There's probably some castoreum or something like that in there is my guess. Because there is a leather note as well in Shalimar. but that's how I like my vanilla. Shalimar is the reference vanilla to me. And but this is a beautiful one as well for a take. And no one does vanilla like Guerlain. I would almost be curious if you blindfolded me and put something like this under my nose, if I would go, ah, Guerlain. I mean, that's the first thing that popped in my head. Now, obviously, I knew it was a Guerlain when I first smelled it, but man, I almost feel like if you know that Guerlain aesthetic, you're gonna instantly pick it out in Angelique Noire. So that's my thoughts. Let me know what yours are. As always, I love seeing your faces in the comments. Thank you for the support. I love the growth of the channel. Do subscribe to the Discord server if you want to kind of talk perfume with us all day long. My phone just like blows up all day. I have to have it on silent. It's just Discord messages all day long. But yeah, I mean, I love the interaction with the community. The growth of the channel has been amazing. Love getting to talk about all these fantastic fragrances with you guys. It's an honor and a pleasure. So thank you for watching. Cheers, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.